Good morning, members. Hope you're all well. Hiya, good morning to you. Hope you're okay. Absolutely foul day down here at the club. Chucking it down. Grizzly, horrible. Good to be inside. Hope all well with you. Good bit of golf last night. Low scores, very low scores. It's going to be a very low scoring Masters. If that course stays damp, let's keep firing at the pin, won't we? See how man DeChambeau's not doing so good. So if you're just coming online now and you haven't signed in, then please do try and sign in. Then you can join the debate on the side here. Ask me some questions. I've got 2 or 3 questions this week about a couple of bits and bobs I'm going to run through during the session. But any questions that you've got regarding what I'm talking about or what you've seen on TV over the weekend, over the past couple of days, or in general about your own swing, then just let me know. Some incredible rounds out there. The long course, let's say 7,400. Not much run on the ball, firing those long irons in. Good morning, Helen. Hope you're well. Nice to see you. Okay, a couple more minutes, then we'll get started. We're going to start with a couple of myths of the golf swing today. I've got some fantastic photographs of some swing positions, which are very, very misleading. I've got 2 to show you. And like I say, really misleading and easy to sort of think that they are true because it's a picture. Just accept pictures are true, but not on these. Okay, 1 more minute, then we'll go. I haven't fact checked it yet, but I read somewhere last night that this said that Bryson DeChambeau's had more provisional balls than he has birdies at some stage of his round yesterday. Alrighty, well, a very good morning to everybody. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. A bit fuzzy again. I've got a bit of an issue with the Wi-Fi, I think, Ian. When I looked at it back last night, it didn't seem so fuzzy on the video. I am clean shaven, I do assure you. I do shave every day, even on my day off. So I'm not sure where the fuzziness is coming from. It's definitely coming from my end because I'm running the Wi-Fi through my phone because the Wi-Fi in the studio is playing up a little bit. Alrighty, so let's have a look here. So there he is, the man of the moment. He's had a terrible Masters so far. And just look at that shaft bend right there. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And here is Barn Rat. And again, look at the huge amount of shaft bend that's there. Now, those are both pitches which are very misleading. If we take someone who's equally as strong, if not stronger than both of them, there's Tiger with absolutely no shaft bend. So let's go back first of all. There's our man Bryson. The Barn Rat. And then Tiger. So if they're all swinging that club head at more or less, or within a very tight range of the same club head speed and therefore the same or very similar ball speed. The differences in those pictures have to be misleading. And what we see in the Barn Rat and the Bryson pictures, a huge amount of shaft bend. And for years, when we've seen those photographs as pros, we thought, wow, look at the bend on those guys. And they're pulling down so much, creating so much power and lag and energy and what have you in the shaft. But what actually happens, and I discovered this last year, is that when a digital camera takes photographs, it doesn't take a photograph like that at very, very high speed. It takes a photograph in a series of millions of lines coming down. So there is this very slight delay in time on certain cameras between the photograph, what's being photographed here, and what's happening down here. Now, of course, in a moving shot, when that club's moving down here, the camera can only film what it sees, and as it moves down the shaft, it's seeing different parts of what's happening in different parts of time, or different sequence in time. So there's a very, very slight distortion there, and that shaft bend doesn't actually take place. Tiger here, who's been photographed by a professional sort of photographer who's using exactly the correct camera for that shot, he's taken a photograph there, and it shows exactly just how little shaft bend there is when the pros hit the ball, or when they swing the club there. And the reason for that is that they have extremely stiff shafts. I've held many of the world's top players' clubs, and they feel like mallets to me. They're so heavy. The handles tend to be quite a bit thicker, a bit more sort of weight in the handles. And some of them even put lead tape. If you look at old-fashioned leaded windows with there's a cross hatching going across them there, then we used to use that tape. You often see it even now on the back of clubs for pros when they put the tape on the back of the club there to add some weight to the club. Lots of pros want the clubs to be even heavy. So remember, we have two weights to a golf club. One is its dead weight. That's just what it weighs there. Let's say 350 grams for this club here. Then we also have its swing weight. If I turn a club upside down, it feels ever so light. If I turn it the correct way, of course, it feels its more normal golf swinging weight. And that's called its swing weight. And the swing weight is simply a balance of where the weight is. That's the fulcrum there. I know you scientists like a bit of early morning Richard Harrison cod science here. So if that's the fulcrum there, the pros like that weight to be quite heavy. They want the head to be quite heavy, because they like to swing the club with some more mass and get some more sort of feel in their hands. If the club's too light, they can't control it because it wobbles all over. Other pros like that weight to be heavy, but also to have extra weight in the head and in the handle here. It's called back weighting. And of course, best player of all time did it all through his career, put an awful lot of weight at the top of his club. And when he picked his club up, it felt heavy. You know, modern clubs feel much, much lighter now, so we want to create some more speed, but we don't want speed without any mass on the strike there. So the weight of the club and the shaft of the club there have to balance. If the club is super long, as Bryson's is, at 48 inches when he's doing his rehearsal swings or when he's his off-season, so to speak, or like Mickelson. Ian yesterday was telling that Mickelson's using a 48-inch, well, someone mentioned it to me yesterday anyway, at the Masters this week. If that club is super long, the longer it becomes, the more it will bend. And so they make the shaft super stiff. So the shaft gets longer, they have to make the club even stiffer. So those pictures are false. Sorry to sort of burst in anyone's bubble if you enjoyed those pictures, but that's absolutely what happens. Let me get out of light there. Alrighty, so that's just a little aside to today. We're going to talk about the direction of forces here. So if you look at that position there, that's one of the world long drive monsters. And you can see it's not a particularly athletic looking position there. It just looks like a muscle man, quite heavy. There's nothing about that which looks particularly elegant or glamorous, but that's not his job. His job is to bomb the ball as far as possible. And so the conversation, if you want to really irritate those guys and you want to wind them up, you ask them how they chip and how they put, what their handicap is. They're not playing golf. They're just going for all-out distance all the time. Now, because they're at the absolute peak of creating distance and power in the swing, that's why there's such a natural resource now for the world's top players. And so the world's top players are all moving towards swinging like that in some fashion with the driver. They're either experimenting with it or they're going to spend a winter off season doing it. So if we look at that picture there, we can actually see he's quite straight in the back, even though he's got a curve in the back. His body is positioned vertically. He's almost leaning backwards on the ball. And this is another thing we have to get into with our, when we look at pictures of the swing. We've got to look at a picture and say, well, look, yes, that's a static motion there. And oh, look, he's behind the ball at impact. But where's the motion? Where's the motion in that swing? It's clear as day the motion in that swing is going that way. So there's no point building your knowledge bank or your swing intentions around one picture, because the picture doesn't tell us everything, if we just look at it in isolation, we're looking to get where's the motion in that swing. There's loads of photographs I can show you of the world's top players hitting the ball, and they're quite a long way behind the ball. One of the big sources of power in a swing, we talk about swing directions, is that the left hip, if you in as a lefty, or right hip, through impact, is pulling this way. We're trying to send the ball that way, so full 90 degrees of difference there. It's pulling this way on the way back to allow the club to snap through. So one of the big measurements that the pros have, the tour pros have, is that if the left hip socket is behind the impact, they know they're in business. For a lot of amateur golfers, that unfortunately means if I put left hip behind it, I'll fall back and I don't quite get through the ball. And that's one of the biggest problems in the game. If you're trying to send the ball that way, but your body is moving that way, then your motion and your intention are going in two different directions, literally two different directions. It couldn't be any worse. And that's why when you look to Gary Player throughout his whole career, he would swing up and then walk through the shot because he knew that's where the target was and that's where the intention of his swing ought to be. So in very blunt terms, we're going to get into a bit more details, I know you want that. In very blunt terms, Player would swing through and just throw his entire body at the shot to go that way. He was short and less strong than the other guys, but he just knew that if he threw everything into it, he'd get all the way through. There's only one pro who hit the ball off the back foot. He used to be the head pro of the RAC club, a Ryder Cup player called Peter Butler. He's called him back foot Butler. So Peter was an extremely good player, Ryder Cup player, first person to ever hold him on the Ryder Cup. And he would hit the ball, so I'd make sure I got my right foot in shot here. He would hit the ball, and then rock back like that, back foot Butler. That's the way he played, but he was the anomaly. The overwhelming majority of pros and amateur golfers go forwards to their target. So let's find some pictures here now. And I want to answer Simon Dixon's question. Simon asked about Simon's 6'4", 6'5", very tall, loves his golf, but he gets a bad back. So if we look here, this is Jamie Sadlowski. There's not an awful lot to him. He's sort of only bombing the ball 420, 430, 440, that sort of modest, sort of delicate range. Not a big man, but look what he does there. He creates width in every part of his set of positions there. So he's got 4 arrows there discussing where he's creating width. And that then determines the direction of the forces in his swing. So let's start from the ground up. That's the sequence of the golf swing. The first arrow I showed you, I'll show them again, is an arrow between the width of his stance. Long hitters stand wide, and that gives them the fullest, widest arc possible. Now, the range of motion then isn't side to side, and that's called a sway, or any lateral movement in the swing is a disaster. You'll never see a very good player, or you'll see very, very few very good players with that right knee, that right hip, and that right shoulder outside the right side of the body. We know from previous sessions that the force of direction for the right side is that way. Yeah. As I pull my body that way, and from this angle here, I pull my body that way, it creates this space in the legs here. And that space is stabilized by the width of his stance. You can't swing a golf club if you have a narrow stance. There's very, very few players who have done over the narrow stance. Lee Westwood being the most notable. And it's quite interesting, Lee Westwood, the way he walks, he's sort of very barrel-chested, very strong in the buttocks, very strong in the legs. He has quite a narrow gait as well. When he walks, quite a narrow gait. So I think that narrow stance is just generally a sort of a gait thing for him, a physicality thing. So the second arrow, once he's got the width in his stance down, is the width of his feet to the ball. The second arrow, a third arrow now. So distance from the golf ball to his feet, and then distance from his shaft and his hands to his body. Now the old maxim used to be, and I wince when I remind myself of what I used to teach, because that's what we were taught and what all the top players in the world were thinking at the time, was there should only be one depth of a hand from the top of the club to the thigh here. And I spent years trying to get people into that position, watching them shank it. The minute I started to shank it, I said, well, forget that, move miles away, get further away from the ball, in a panic. And by the way, you've got to understand, as a pro, when we're giving you lessons, there's an awful lot of panic in there. There's an awful lot of sort of looking at the watch thinking, well, I've only got 30 minutes to get this right. And the minute you start hitting a few pipes out to the right, it's not pleasant for me, it's not pleasant for you. Now, when I often use this analogy, but you wouldn't take your car to a mechanic and say, here you go, you've got 30 minutes to fix it. You say, can you fix my car, obviously. It's the same with the golf swing. There's not just 30 minutes to fix it or an hour to fix it. So sometimes we've got to try and do what we can as quickly as we can. So like I said, I win stand, I look back and I think, well, getting people to stand just this one hand away from the ball here, when the touring professionals weren't doing that and still aren't doing it, they're standing further and further away. Why? It widens the arc, it creates space. And there's a limit. If they stand too far from the ball, they become disconnected. The hands, arms, and body can't work as a unit. So there's a limit now, but they're testing that limit by lengthening their clubs and standing further from the ball. So those two arrows there, I think, are fascinating, really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arrows. We started with the one on the ground, talking about the width of his stance. And the second arrow is the distance from the golf ball to his feet. Third arrow now is hands from his body. And that width from hands to body is Bryson all over. Getting some space out here creates the arc width in his swing. Getting in close and getting gummed means we're going to get trapped here. So oftentimes when I show people pictures of the shaft coming into impact, it's here, at that angle there, but not with the hands level with the body, but more out here. So there's more space. So the pros come down and swing, we've got that position there. And you've all seen this photograph here. It's one of my favorites. I use it an awful lot in my coaching. We can see the angle of the shaft there. And just as important, look at the distance of the hands from the body. There's only McIlroy whose hands look close to his thigh, whereas Thomas and Koepka got their hands way in front of them. And again, it's another element of width. So let's go back to the Sadlowski picture again. So the next picture, and this one's particularly for you, Simon, the next two arrows are from his chin to his hands, and from the back of his head to the back of his belt. So those two arrows there, he's trying to create as much space as possible. So the first thing he does is he stands quite upright. Now on that picture there, I'm not saying he has a rod straight back, because that's not as athletic as it might look. We all would love a perfectly straight posture like that, but a golfing posture is slightly more rounded. We want the arms to sort of be a bit softer around the body. We don't need that ramrod straight position there. So his first position, what they're saying with that arrow there, is standing tall. And in Simon's case, he's 6'5". He needs clubs that are quite a bit longer for him to get the club down to the ground. But there is a way of finding that. And oftentimes when you see the pros walk in fact, you see every pro do this, when they walk into the ball, they don't just stand there and assume a position. They adjust themselves into position and wriggle themselves around. They're trying to find the balance. They're trying to find the best balance to the ground so they can create more forces during the swing. They're also trying to create height and space. So in your case, Simon, as they stand up to the ball, upright as you can, chin off your chest. And the next arrow you see is the arrow from the chin to the hands. And again, that's creating space right there. So what he's doing there, first of all, is making himself as big as possible. He's not making anything in that position there small, narrow, or compact. Widening the stance, giving himself a load of space. Now, there's an awful lot of intent in that pitch. If you watch me about to hit a golf ball now with that picture there, it looks like I intended it a long way. A narrow stance, when I'm all gummed up here, looks like I'm trying to play a delicate shot, a chip shot. That's why we stand in a small position for small shots. Alrighty. So let's get up now to the top of the backswing. If that doesn't make you wince at 9:30 on a Saturday morning, then nothing will. And that's incredible. Look at the stretch in that body. So I want you all to try and do this now. For you, Ian, it's your right arm. For the right-handed golfer, it's the left arm. Take your left arm, point it up to the sky, like that, so it's vertical. See if you can do it. And now see if you can look at the ground at the same time. So I can only do that if I turn myself around and do that. Imagine trying to do that in a golf swing. Getting your body around and lifting that arm so it's vertical. So he's in that position there. And boy, that is painful. And that's a real twist on my back. Now, we've talked before about the longevity of tour professionals. It's amazing how they have such long lives. They live their lives with sort of lots of twists and turns and injuries and what have you. But as I'm doing that position there, thankfully, I only have to be in that position there for 0.0 something of a second. It's a very brief amount of time. And this again is where this conversation today is about the split between position and motion. He's only in that position there for the briefest of times. But I mean, look at that glove arm. Hand above his head, way above his head, and all the way around. So what are the directional forces there? Well, his back hip here has gone backwards. So we say, oh, the hip's gone that way. It's actually his buttocks that gone that way. And why has that gone that way? It's because the force of the leg has pushed him that way. There's a huge difference there, and I'll show you from a different angle in a second, in the flex and positioning of the knees. His left knee is significantly lower than his right knee. And that's because the leg action in the swing. He has pulled that buttock back there. As a consequence of that happening, that buttock going back, if that knee is lower and that knee is higher, the directional force in that swing has to be coming up that leg and backwards. As that leg straightens, the force comes upwards. As it pulls backwards and straightens, the force goes that way and upwards. So we're never looking for a swing which moves laterally like this. There's always a change of direction up and backwards. So the top of the swing, he is what they call loaded. Not a phrase I like at all, but that's just personal. So he's loaded there. There's a ton of power there. Now we know what the leverage is looking like between his shaft of the club, his wrist, glove wrist, his left elbow and his left shoulder. But the direction of forces there are up and backwards. So if we were to measure him on a pressure plate, like a big set of scales, let's say for argument's sake, these muscle guys weigh 20 stone. We talked a bit about this yesterday. Let's say they weigh 20 stone. As he swings up on the way back, as he goes backwards and up, the pressure that's on the plate is lessened by 1/3. So as he swings the club away and up, he weighs, inverted commas, 1/3 less. On the return to the ball, he weighs 2/3 more. And that's when these guys push down and away. So I'll show you this picture in a second. One of my favorites again. This happening here, the force is going up, down, around. It's going all over the place to deliver a blow down to that ball there. So they're optimizing their body pressure and their directional forces into that club head there. Excuse me. Excuse me. So once he's got himself to that position of being up here and back there, on the return to the ball, there's definitely a force down. They squat down. And if we have a look here, let's take a look here. There's another big man. That's Joe Miller. When my friend first started teaching him, he was 10 stone, and now he's 20 stone at the side of him. So he's swung the club up there. You can see his back hip has gone backwards. Not as much knee bend there, but there's definitely a difference in the angles of the knees, and that's a big giveaway there. And if we look at the height of his right knee and the height of his left knee, there's a difference there. And if the knees are at different heights, then so must the hip and the upper leg. So as we see there, his left knee goes down, that knee goes up. That definitely is a force, and his right side has gone upwards. He's going up. Now watch what he does now. Bounces the knees down, but look at his toes off the ground. So his toes are on the ground, I beg your pardon, his heels are off the ground. He's pushing himself off his toes. And then there is an impact from a different angle, way up onto his toes. And you can see now he's forcing his body weight really deep into his buttocks, his right buttock in particular. Left buttock, beg your pardon, in particular, and push himself away, and that's what gives him all that space in his hands and arms. So you can see then, second and a half, the entire swing. Most of the swing takes place from here. When they've lifted up, they then come down, raise their heels off the ground, and push themselves away from the ball as they make this turning action here. So there's an awful lot of up, down, and back in the golf swing. Up, down, back, through. Now, I showed you this before, what the long drivers do. They take these big sort of 25 kilogram weights. And as they swing back, or 50 kilogram weights, the big guys, as they rehearse their movements back, they learn how to pull that weight up. And so let's say they weigh, for ease of argument, 20 stone. They add 50 kilograms to their weight here. So that's 20 stone plus 50 kilograms. On the pressure plate, they're trying to remove as much of that for a little brief amount of time on their backswing. On the return swing, they really stamp down. So they're trying to create as much stamping down motion as possible. And again, look at the left heel motion we talked about. There's an awful lot of work with the scratch team this winter. A lot of it's been working experiments on the left heel position and getting to stamp it down. Getting them to learn to go to the top of the swing up here, stamp that left heel on the return to the swing, and that pulls everything into place. They're learning how to create or multiplying how much they create the force of their swing going down to pull the club into position and snap into the back of the ball. So if we then look at the most important part of it all, which is the, just 1 second. So there he is. Next shot, look at that, look at the pressure now. Look at the pressure that's going down into the knees, into the ground. And then at impact, look how his left leg straightens up. So it all takes place at breakneck speed, the pressure going up and down. But at impact there, that's an amazing photograph of impact there. This is what I was saying before about the left hip socket being behind the ball as impact. We can see he's definitely done that. Or it's sort of certainly in line. He's leaning right behind the ball. And again, this is a very misleading thing to sort of set your focus on, because the motion of his swing is most certainly 150 miles an hour towards the target. There's no element there of him looking like he's going to fall back at all. All the motion, look at his right knee as it's kicking forwards. As his right knee kicks forwards into the shot, his left leg and his left thigh and his left buttock pull backwards, and all that motion creates club head movement forwards into the target. And again, this is interesting. Here's Joe Miller, beg your pardon. So again, look at that back there, very rounded. Now in golf, that's incredibly athletic, that position there. Then look at the extension of his arms as he's pulling his body towards his buttocks. And I'll show you the next photograph, a bit more evidence of that. As he's pulling his body toward his buttocks, he's extending his arms right out to get the full leverage and width and arc in the swing. So in that photograph there, and again, when we're looking at motion and the position, as he pulls himself up like this and stretches his arms out like that, it's because he's forced the club downwards and through. He's not getting stuck in any way here. So as he pulls that down through, think of the hammer thrower at the Olympics. They go like this and then throw it out. It's that huge extension. And so those glamorous pictures of the tour professionals that you can see are after impact when they're finishing this position here. It's a lovely photograph. It shows all the athleticism in the swing. It shows all the use of science, that big stretching out position there. Most amateur golfers get stuck and have a little chicken wing in there. Now, you've seen me write about the chicken wing so many times before. It's one of my favourite topics, really. The simplest way to get a chicken wing in your swing is for your body to stop moving. That lever loosens, and it comes up and gets that ugly position there, rather than the body moving out of the way to create all that space through here. So getting rid of a chicken wing is very simple and very quick, as long as the body gets out of the way. Now, if you watch me here, if I then, what we're talking about the next frame of that pitch, and also when we're going to move on to Bryson DeChambeau's motion, is if I wanted to eliminate a chicken wing, the simplest way to do it is to pull my left foot right back and push my arms out. And that effectively is what the bombers are doing anyway. You see that big motion there? Chicken wings, everyone loves a chicken wing. So we then look at his left foot, which is spun around entirely now, just about there. And go back 2 frames. You can then see just how that left foot's looking there. It looks like it's, you can just see it behind his right foot. It's pretty much planted on the ground. We know that his left heel will be rising off the ground at that point. But then as he comes through, look at that left foot now, a full, at least 90 to 120 degrees spin around. And again, look how coaching changes. I spent lots of my early parts of my career stopping people from doing that, because there's a big difference between spinning and losing balance and being poorly planted to the ground and applying true force in the swing. So I can take photographs of an error and the left foot looks like that, and I can take photographs of the world's longest hitters and the photograph looks like that. They're definitely not the same positions. Position 1 of the world's longest hitters is that as they pull that foot back, the force goes up through the leg and then returns back down to the ground, or when they're stamping down like that, and then to get out of the way, that happens. An amateur golfer who does it incorrectly will have lost their balance and sort of spun around, and that left foot kicks off the ground. So what you see now with Bryson DeChambeau, who's going to miss the cut, I don't think, or may have done already, I'm not sure. As he swings through, that foot spins around, and that creates an awful lot of speed and position and space for his body to come through. Here. Alrighty. So I had a great question from Robert Wolf, and he's asking about how we can strike the ball better on the fairway. So I want to do a bit of work on TrackMan next time. We can talk about this in a bit more detail. Especially this time of year, when we do get back to it, it's going to be a bit more, muddy and soggy out there. And so the quality of strike is really key. Now, with the irons, which is what Robert's saying, see the club head, as we know, forms an arc around the body. Ascending, descending, shallowest part of the swing, and then ascending up here. We want the ascending blow with the driver, but the descending blow with the irons. So that's one thing, yes, we need to have the descending blow. What we then need to know is where our lowest point of the arc actually is. So if I have this rule here, which I'm pretty sure you can see, I'm just going to tilt that camera a bit more towards the floor. The line represents the middle of my swing, the middle of my arc, ascending, descending, low point, arc. And Pete Carroll, one of the world's great coaches, has a great drill. He just gets people to do this when he's trying to get them to understand the low point of the arc. It's a little exercise, I think, that it sort of puts a shape to the bottom of the arc. So if that's the bottom of the arc there, Robert, well, that's the middle of my stance, I beg your pardon. I want the bottom of my arc to be there. I'm swinging at reasonable speed there, and I'm just clipping the mat after I've hit over the bar there. What's happening in your game is the low point of your strike is typically going to be a bit too close to there. What actually happens when you strike a ball is the club descends, makes contact, and then we make contact with the ground somewhere after the ball. So we want to be striking the irons on the descent, hit the ball cleanly, and then make contact with the ground just after. I caddied for sort of marketing, advertising bigwig who was playing in a pro-am with Nick Faldo the week after Faldo had won the Masters in 1996. And so when people play in pro-ams, I always thought, I'll come and caddy for you. It's great for me to go and watch the world's top players firsthand. So I'm caddying for him. Faldo's #1 player in the world, just won the Masters, and he hits his drive down the first, lovely right, blah, blah, blah. Hits the long iron second, and the divot's miles after the ball. I mean, surprisingly miles. So let's say the ball's there. He's made contact here, and his divot starts somewhere over here, way after the ball. Really, what we call a thin strike, a bit of a clean strike. So that was obviously first shot of the day. 3, 4, 5 holes later, it'd be a long iron, a short iron, a sand wedge, a 3 iron. Everyone flushed to the target, but every single one of the divot is miles after the ball. He hasn't spoken to anybody for, say, 7 or 8 holes. He's focused on his game, incredible intellect and incredible ability to focus. And on the 9th tee, I said to him, do you mind if I ask you, I'm a PGA pro, do you mind if I ask you why your divots are so far after the ball? And he just said, thin to win, and just wandered off. And that was it. There was sort of 3 words were, enough for me. And basically what he's saying there is if the club is caught very cleanly on the ball, and the strike is clean, and we make contact with the ground after the ball, then the further after the ball we get it, the cleaner the strike is, and the better the shot is. Anything where you strike the ball very slightly, I mean, I'm talking very slightly early, is punishing, because the club slows down and mud gets between the club face and the ball. You don't optimize the speed of the ball and the quality of the strike, because the mud gets stuck and the ball comes out much, much weaker. At this time of the year, you get quite heavily penalised by a slightly muddy strike. I'm talking about 3 or 4 millimetres now. When you watch them on the close-up shots on high-speed cameras, 3 or 4 millimetres, that's an explosion of mud in between the ball and the club face. And of course, you've got that sort of lack of quality contact feel in the hands. But more importantly, the science level, the ball's got mud in between it and the club face. It will not fly as powerfully as possible. So the exercise for you, Robert, is that when you set yourself up here, put something on the ground and have a few swings and get the motion of really clipping that ground after your club on the ground. It forces you to move forwards. You're quite a static player in that sense. You stay very, very still, keep your head very, very still and hit like this. You need a little bit of motion towards your target there. Now, I said to you earlier, we're not looking for any lateral motion in a golf swing. That's probably not, but that's not entirely true, because there is some motion that way. As I pull myself this way, I want a little bit of push through there as well. And you'll see that when I finish my swing, if my head is now over the steel bar, as I finish, it won't be on the steel bar, it will be that way. So let me clarify my point. You don't want any lateral motion on the way back. You want rear motion on the way back, and that has some rear motion and lateral motion on the way through. Alrighty, so any questions about what we've talked about you want to discuss, or in any detail, or anything which I've said which is confusing or I hear myself saying things, and this is a definite, and you can't do that, and then only 2 minutes later I'm saying, well, you can do a little bit of it, you know. So if there's anything else you want to talk about, let me know. We've covered quite a lot of stuff there today. And also it's all about putting it in sequence. It's all about putting it into exactly where you want the upward lift in the swing, where you want the downward pressure in the swing, where you want the rearward pressure in the swing, where you want the movement through, where you need to be slow, where you need to be quick. And what we have seen with all the top players now, they are quickening their backswing. What's been proven many times now to the top players, that they, at their level, with their heavy clubs and their brilliant hand-eye coordination, zillions of hours of practice, they can speed their backswing up to create more power. On a more prosaic level, club level, you're already too fast anyway. The problem with most of you and me is that when we swing the club back too quickly, we don't multiply that speed on the way down. What the pros are finding is that if they take it back quite significantly faster, it gives them even more speed on the way down. Most amateur golfers rush the club back, run out of puff. On the way down, they haven't got the energy or the physicality to get right through it and give it a big bang. Alrighty, well, thanks ever so much for tuning in. Do let me know if there are different times of the week or times of the day which suit you better. I did a session last night for the soldiers, the On-Course Foundation, at 8:30 at night. It was more like a sort of a Q&A and a chat, really, because I did it in my house. So let me know if what a time suit you. Any more questions, you know where I am. Just send me a message. Thanks ever so much for all of you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed it. Any questions, give me a shout. I look forward to seeing you next time. Keep your chin up through the lockdown, the non-lockdown lockdown. Why golfers aren't being allowed on the golf course is crackers and tennis players as well. And here's the other thing as well, is someone said to me the other day, a golf pro said to me, he said golfers are good at observing the rules because the game is a rule-based sport. It's a rule-based game. And I would say for the most part, that's absolutely true of golfers and tennis players. So we should be definitely getting back out there, hopefully, before the lockdown ends. Anyway, I wish you all good health. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. And I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.